The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Tell you about our day. Should I tell you about the day first? Yeah. My little conversation with a nice gentleman named Vladimir Putin. But we had a good talk, and I think that progress is being made.
I don't know how many of you got to see the president's speech in Saudi Arabia. I think it will go down as one of the most profound foreign policy speeches in American history. And where it outlined a vision for the future and a vision of prosperity. And I tell people, we have a president of peace. In fact, I'll tell you kind of an aside, one of the cardinals I was meeting with, Mr. President, the day before the papal mass said to me, you know, it's very unusual for us. It's, you know, we have an American president that wants peace, and it's some of the Europeans that are constantly talking about doing war stuff. So it's kind of the world's upside down in their mind right now. It's usually the other way around. And it's a great honor to work for a president who literally spends half his day, maybe more, trying to stop wars, end wars, prevent wars. And it's an extraordinary thing to be a part of.
We know that J.D. Vance presented the pontiff with a Bears jersey that said Pope Leo XIV on the back of it. So it seems like a very happy reset, which is exactly what both camps were hoping for when you consider the kind of contentious relationship that existed between Pope Francis and the Trump administration.
There's our kid right there, Ewan.
Okay.
You can probably imagine in the United States, people are extremely excited about you and about your
yeah, very much. An original bronze sculpture. The peace is a fragile flower.
And you hear this all the time. You hear people say, no, we have to go treat that person with force. The Iranians are going to manipulate you in a dialogue, and so you're not going to be effective there. They may attempt to manipulate me. I don't think that they're going to be able to manipulate me.
Anything can be solved through dialogue, and we're certainly seeing lots and lots of dialogue today. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show. You can get to the live video stream of this program at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel. Just go to rumble.com/Trumpet Daily. If you'd like to email the show, you can reach us at td@thetrumpet.com. Lots and lots to get to on today's show. I mentioned this quote. I didn't quote it, but it's from Herbert Armstrong back in 1982, and he's talking about all of these events, these earth-shaking events happening in the world at that time. And evidently, Yasser Arafat had just met with the Pope and was photographed with him. And Mr. Armstrong said this. Mr. Armstrong, he was an ambassador for peace. Unofficially, but an ambassador for peace. And he was traveling the world talking to diplomats, to prime ministers, to presidents, world leaders, everywhere. And he says here, although my aides told me Yasser Arafat had invited me to a meeting with him, I refused to see him or to allow one of my aides to see him in my stead. No, not going to sit down with the devil. I'm not going to sit down with a terrorist. I'm not going to have dialogue with a terrorist. What a different approach than what we see today, where nothing is off the table. I mean, they will have dialogue with anyone. You know, it reminds, just speaking of some of that church history with Herbert Armstrong, he died in 1986. And as many of you know, there was this wholesale rebellion against the teachings of the church, the teachings of the Bible. And one of the things that was also shocking along with that, just how quickly they transformed into just any old church, is when we found out those Laodicean leaders were secretly meeting with or having discussions with all of these organizations that had singled out Herbert Armstrong and the Worldwide Church of God as this cult So they have cult-like doctrines, and they have oppressive government. And they had been criticizing Mr. Armstrong and the WCG for so many years. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, to see or to hear about them reaching out to these people, these organizations that hated them. I mean, they were willing to talk to anybody. And in a lot of ways, I mean, that's what we're seeing here today. You can solve anything through dialogue. Well, what if that dialogue is with the devil? Do you think the devil wants to reach sort of a middle ground? Do you think the devil wants to compromise a bit and then you compromise? He is looking for a total, overwhelming victory. He wants you to surrender. And that's why you have to fight. Again, when people come and talk about wanting peace, you can't fault the motivation. But what if the other side doesn't want peace? That's what we've been writing about in the Trumpet.com these past many months. I think it's interesting that one of the first messages my father gave following the inauguration was that President Trump has betrayed Israel. He was talking about that in January. I've played the clips for you already. But then it appeared in the March issue of the Trumpet magazine in article form. Tomorrow's News Today. I mean, who else was talking about that back in January, February, March of this year? My father says in his inaugural address right before announcing this deal, talking about the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, President Trump said, "My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and a unifier. That's what I want to be. That's a good goal," my father says, "but it must be achieved honorably. History is full of appeasers who sought peace at any cost and invited the opposite." What happens when you seek peace at any cost, even the cost of surrendering? It says, he's quoting Melanie Phillips here, Donald Trump doesn't want a war on his watch. He has virtually promised the American people that he will bring an end to war. But sometimes an enemy arises with whom any agreement is a deal with the devil. If you go into an agreement or a ceasefire deal with the devil, that's only going to lead to more war. That's the truth. That's the truth. The Jerusalem Post. Now, the White House is denying this report. We've talked, though, about the snubs. You know, President Trump last week snubbing Israel. J.D. Vance on his travels this week snubbing Israel. This is from the Jerusalem Post. It says, President Trump has been increasing pressure on Israel over recent days, an anonymous source told the Washington Post on Monday. Trump has been letting Israel know, we will abandon you if you do not end this war. This is already happening. As I say, my father spoke about it in January. So this is probably true. Again, its sources are saying this. We don't know who they are, but this is the Jerusalem Post, the Washington Post. And then just look at what's happening on the world stage. I mean, where is Israel? Well, they're ramping up their attacks in Gaza to wipe out Hamas, and it's clear that the Trump administration does not like this. This was in the latest, where was it? Today's Trumpet Brief. Just look at that if you haven't subscribed to that, talking about the tough time or the difficult position that Israel is in right now to try to kill terrorists that want to kill Jews. They're in war. They're in the midst of war. And Donald Trump is coming along, Steve Witkoff and all of them saying, listen, we want peace at any cost. Well, what if it's not honorable? What if you're entering into a deal with the devil, as Melanie Phillips says? This article I read through yesterday, Witkoff exposes major flaw in Donald Trump's peace deals. And in this article, he quotes Witkoff saying that anything can be solved through dialogue. Anything? As I said on yesterday's show, I mean, what about the dialogue coming out of Iran right now? Forget about what's said across the table while you sit together for 90 minutes. What's actually happening on the battlefield? What's actually happening in the Kremlin or wherever the Iranian parliament is? Tehran, I suppose, somewhere. But what's actually happening in Qatar? What about the funding that's going out to support terrorism? It says after Mr. Trump's Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal, Richard Palmer says here, Mr. Fleury warned that Donald Trump was dealing with the devil. And then he quotes my father again. As I say, we were right on this from the very start of this administration. This world is full of grave dangers, my father wrote. Sometimes you must fight or else be taken captive or destroyed by evil people. But he goes on and says that fighting is hard. And a lot of people don't want to do that. I played that clip for you yesterday, Donald Trump from 2017, saying, you know, we could take the easy way and appease, or we can confront. We can confront evil. And back then there was a willingness to confront Qatar, to confront Iran, to go after Soleimani. That's not there today. I mean, what a sudden and dramatic and shocking turn of events. Hamas wants Israel's destruction above all else. The only deal it will sign are ones that bring it closer to that objective. That's right. There was this snapshot taken of President Trump last week in Saudi Arabia. Look at this. This is the president of Syria, the jihadist in a suit, a nice fancy suit. But there he is. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He should have been taken out by a drone strike years ago. He's responsible for murdering Americans and Jews. And we're shaking his hand? We're making peace, quote unquote, with individuals such as this. Sam sent me this just a moment ago before I went to air. From CNN, U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday had tea with a former jihadist who until recently had a $10 million U.S. bounty on his head. Until just recently. But you'll recall from last week, Donald Trump said, yeah, we're lifting all the sanctions off of Syria, and he's having afternoon tea with this guy. I mean, this is a shameful capitulation. He's doing this as he's snubbing Israel, as he's applying pressure on Israel to surrender, to let Hamas survive. It's a stunning turn of events. I mean, this is Leviticus 26 and verse 19 in picture form. Where is the pride in our power? I mean, we're 24 years on from 9/11. And this guy was the enemy all through that time. And now I guess we're just, we're shaking hands with the terrorists. Steve Witkoff, this is from the Times of Israel. It's from a couple months ago. But it says here, in a 90-minute interview, chock full of headlines, Witkoff discussed the motivations of Israel, Hamas, and Qatar in the ongoing Gaza war, offered an assertive defense of Doha against critics questioning the Islamist country's motivations, and acknowledged his concern about the Gaza war's potential for destabilizing countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Listen to this. He also suggested that Syria's new leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, could be a changed man since his days in Al-Qaeda. Witkoff looks him in the eyes and says, I think he's a changed man. I think we can work with him. I think he's a peacemaker. I think dialogue can solve anything. That's the thinking. And as I've been discussing in the last couple of programs, it's dangerous thinking. when you deal with the dangerous heart of man, Jeremiah 17, when you deal with this deceitful and wicked heart, especially the heart of a terrorist who wants to kill you, are we dealing with the devil? Are we making a deal with the devil? You know, for so many years, we talked about Trump derangement syndrome, and rightfully so. It's been on display, as I say, for years. It's still there in many quarters. But what we're seeing around the world now, you could call it peace derangement syndrome. We're pursuing peace at any cost. It's certainly not honorably. Pursuing peace at any cost. And then you think of these passages in Isaiah, in Jeremiah, in 1 Thessalonians 5. When they say peace, peace, what's coming? Sudden destruction. That's what your Bible says. The fatal flaw in Donald Trump's foreign policy, that was in the May issue of the Trumpet magazine. It says here, Donald Trump wants to be a peacemaker, facilitating peace between Hamas and Israel, or Russia and Ukraine. It just goes right through the list. All these areas. And again, there have been some successes, as I said last week, certainly with India and Pakistan, but look at the big picture. He says here, I think this is actually my article, but it says, yet he has been unable to solve them. His efforts to become a peacemaker and a unifier are hampered by a fatal flaw. President Trump is naively placing his trust in men. Naively placing trust in men. How is this happening? Why is it so starkly different from the first time around, from his first term, where there was at least a show of power and strength and backing Israel while doing it? Those days appear to be over. And here again, you heard it here first. It's the first message my father gave following the inauguration. Look it up on the Key of David. Look into the March issue of the Trumpet magazine. We offer that magazine at no cost or obligation, totally free. You see the 800 number there. Just call our operators today and request a free 1-year subscription to the Trumpet magazine. Solving problems, solving anything through dialogue. President Trump was on the phone with Vladimir Putin. That was a big topic in the news cycle yesterday, as he talked about, well, you heard a bit of it there in the cold open. He had a conversation with that nice gentleman, Vladimir Putin. Now, he may have been slightly joking, but a nice gentleman, really? And he's shaking hands with the jihadist from Syria? Is he a nice gentleman too? What about Bibi? Is Bibi a nice gentleman still? Or is he a warmonger? He just wants to destroy Gaza. The warrior spirit in this administration is gone. And now it's just 100% art of the deal. Handshakes, dialogue. Here's President Trump taking questions on this phone call he had with Putin, clip 4.
On Ukraine and on your call today that you had with President Putin, you said last week that you thought nothing was going to happen, no advances would be made until you and Putin got together. Do you still feel that way?
I think something's going to happen. It's a very big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved. But I think something's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I'd just back away and they're going to have to keep going. Again, this was a European situation. It should have remained a European situation. Should have remained. But we have, because the past administration felt very strongly that we should be involved, and we got involved much more than Europe did in terms of the money and all of the things that we gave. We gave massive amounts, I think record-setting amounts given to a foreign. There's never been anything like this, both weaponry and money. And Europe gave a lot also, but they didn't give anywhere near what we gave. We gave probably almost 3 times the amount.
So nothing, I'll play the clips of other commentators here in a moment. as they talk about what Putin is doing. He's not going to stop fighting unless he gets the concessions that he's demanding. So the call with the nice gentleman Vladimir Putin, it didn't really accomplish much. Yesterday he also talked, the president did, about trying to reach out to the Pope and to get the Pope's help. And you saw in the cold open, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, they're visiting with the Pope. And they have so many good things to say about the Catholic Church and all the cardinals and the Pope's Mass and everything else. The Pope as a peacemaker, he talks a lot about peace as well. And that's what all of these prominent leaders want. They want peace. They want peace, no matter the cost. They just want the shooting to stop. And well, who doesn't? But at what cost? Is it an honorable deal? I quoted that bit from Churchill from 1932 on yesterday's show, where he talked about the young Nazis marching in the streets of Germany and how they just wanted equal status, according to the leaders of Churchill's day. He said, don't be deluded in your thinking. They want weapons. They want to murder people. Listen to clip 9.
On your call with President Putin today, you've mentioned that the Pope would like to take a role potentially in mediating these talks. Does that mean that the U.S. is taking a step back from...
No. I think it would be great to have it at the Vatican. Maybe it would have some extra significance. And I saw that it was discussed yesterday, so I thought... And people told me that they'd be honored to do it. I would imagine they would be. And so, no, I think it would be maybe helpful. There's tremendous bitterness, anger. And I think maybe that could help some of that anger. So having it at the Vatican would be, in Rome, would be I think it would be a great idea. Thank you.
Now, he goes on and talks about how he inherited this mess, and he's right about that for sure. But he was very confident coming in that dialogue would solve it. Now he's beginning to see there's lots of bitterness on both sides. Putin, as I say, he hasn't dialed it back a bit. Listen to clip 3.
It's a bloodbath. It's an absolute bloodbath. I've seen satellite pictures that are so bad, so horrible, and that's to think that in this day and age we're living with this horrible thing that's going on, and we're doing the best we can. This was not our war. This was not me. We're doing something from the last administration, how they allowed that to happen. It wouldn't have happened. It would have never happened. And you know, the Ukraine-Russia wouldn't have happened, but I'll tell you what else wouldn't have had. October 7th would not have happened. This was a terrible thing also. A lot of bad things happened in the last 4 years, but good things are happening now. We had a tremendous visit in the Middle East.
You mentioned the bloodbath you want to see end in Ukraine. You mentioned that you believe Putin wants peace, but he just attacked Ukraine yesterday. So what makes you think that he wants peace?
Well, he's in a war, you know. I mean, nobody said don't. They're fighting. They're attacking each other. And people are dying all the time. He's in a war. He's fighting a war. Nobody said he was going to stop. I think, is it terrible? Yeah, it's terrible. I think it's terrible.
I didn't really hear an answer there, but she said, you believe Putin wants peace, and yet he's continuing the attack. So does he want peace? Does Vladimir Putin want to make peace? What about the guy heading up Syria, the president of Syria, the Al-Qaeda member, or Qatar and the hundreds of millions that they're funneling into Hamas, even American universities? What about the Ayatollah, the supreme leader in Iran? Does he want peace? Is he a peacemaker? He called President Trump a liar over the weekend. He said, I'm not even going to dignify his comments with a response. And America needs to be destroyed. Death to America. These are madmen. These are tyrants. General Flynn had it right in that tweet we read to you yesterday. He may have killed his chances to be the NSA, because of that tweet, because, you know, he has a warrior-like spirit. And this administration doesn't want that. It wants to send Witkoff and others out around the world to have a dialogue with a jihadist. Listen to Tom Cotton. This is from last week, but again, he's the conservative from Arkansas, and he's convinced, too, that more and more dialogue is going to get this done. Clip 18.
So on this topic of those negotiations and our role in them, NBC is reporting this weekend that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, during 3 high-level meetings with Putin, didn't use his own interpreter, instead using an interpreter from the Kremlin. Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia, told them this. He said using the Kremlin's interpreter was, quote, a very bad idea that put Witkoff at a real disadvantage. McFaul went on to say, I speak Russian, have listened to Kremlin interpreters and U.S. interpreters at the same meeting, and the language is never the same. If that reporting is accurate, why would we agree to that?
Well, first, I don't necessarily credit that reporting, but second, Steve Witkoff is a very skilled and capable negotiator. He has the president's total trust, and he's 100% loyal to the president.
Well, he is 100% loyal, but a skilled and capable negotiator. In real estate, for sure. But as you heard last week, we played the clip where Donald Trump said he had no education or training in Middle East affairs, basically. He learned it in 2 hours. That's crazy. And now we're sitting down with the terrorists, thinking that just a simple discussion, dialogue, he's skilled at it. First time he met up with Putin, I believe, Putin made him wait for 8 hours. Putin is laughing. Putin is bombing. Putin is continuing the offensive warfare in Ukraine. Putin is not. He certainly is not a nice gentleman. He definitely is not a nice gentleman. And I don't think that al-Qaeda leader that now is the president of Syria, I don't think he's had a change of heart. It's just hard for me to believe. Given the agenda of these people, given their passion for violence, for overthrowing the opposition, for killing Jews, if you don't obtain peace honorably, all you're doing is inviting more war. Tom Cotton says, look, he's a skilled negotiator, and then in the same interview, he's talking about how Russia and China are coming together. I mean, that's prophesied. Prophecy's being fulfilled. These are earth-shaking. I mean, you read between the lines and you see these are earth-shaking developments for sure. Play clip 19.
Obviously, while we watch to see what happens with Russia, President Xi there spending time in Moscow this week. And Reuters reported it this way. They say Chinese President Xi Jinping told Russia's Vladimir Putin on Thursday their two countries should be, quote, friends of steel as they pledge to raise cooperation to a new level and, quote, decisively counter the influence of the United States. Your response?
Well, this goes back years. At the start of the Ukraine war, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin declared an all-weather friendship, and China has been covertly supporting Russia's war in Ukraine through the use of dual-use technology. You have Chinese nationals now fighting, at least with the tacit acquiescence of communist China. We shouldn't be surprised to see two anti-American dictators working against American interests. President Trump is clear-eyed about both of them, though.
Okay. Just try to wrap your mind around it for a second. They're anti-American. They're coming together. The reporter, she says here, Jinping told Russia's Vladimir Putin that their two countries should be friends of steel as they pledged to raise cooperation to a new level and decisively counter the influence of the United States. So this is who we're negotiating with. I mean, it's not quite to the level of death to America, but it's certainly on that side. That side of the Ayatollah. It's really amazing to hear, on the one hand, yeah, he's a skilled negotiator. President Trump is clear-eyed. He sees what's going on. You heard in the cold open, Witkoff says, they're not going to manipulate me. No. They're manipulating you as we speak. That's what's happening. Here's General Keane. He was on Fox Business describing Vladimir Putin's strategy in this. As the dialogue goes on, Putin's war continues. Clip 5.
Well, I think we've gotten much of the same from Mr. Putin. I mean, he's got a couple of objectives in mind here. He knows full well that President Trump came into office wanting to end this war, stop the killing, as the president has emphasized many times. He uses the term bloodbath as an example of that, and he's impatient about it. He has a sense of urgency about it. So what Putin has done as a result of the phone call, he's rejected the temporary ceasefire once again. And why is that? Why does he reject that ceasefire? He does that, Maria, because he knows full well if he goes to a ceasefire, that stops the killing. And then the pressure is off the administration to make major concessions to him. And he wants major maximum concessions that make Ukraine so vulnerable, he'll eventually be able to take control of it. He's never given up on that aspiration. And then he also knows the president is impatient, so he drags out these negotiations and makes no concessions at any of these negotiations that have taken place, and I don't expect any of it going forward. And then he obviously talking to the president because he wants to avoid sanctions, and his attempt is to convince the president that he's interested in peace as much as the president is. Of course, his actions don't speak to that.
In other words, that nice gentleman, Vladimir Putin, is manipulating the Trump administration. He knows that if you keep the dialogue going, you know, Donald Trump may come out and say, hey, Putin wants peace. He also knows that if he keeps the dialogue going, the chances of those sanctions being withheld will be much better. And yet his actions, that's why you have to judge by fruits. What is he doing on the battlefield? Donald Trump is right about the fact that it's a bloodbath. But how do you stop it? By dialogue. That's what they're saying. By lots and lots of dialogue. Anything can be solved, can be accomplished, can be drawn up as a peace agreement, as long as there's lots and lots of dialogue. It's interesting that general there said that Putin knows that Donald Trump is after peace at all cost. He knows that he's impatient. He knows he wants the ceasefire done yesterday. And yet it continues, doesn't it? I haven't even really touched on Qatar that much, but it's a longer montage, but we've got, I think it's about 6-7 minutes. It's a flashback to 2017 and 18. You know, Qatar right now, they're our friends. They gave us Air Force One. We accepted the gift. Donald Trump said you would be stupid not to accept it. So they're our partners. They're peacemakers. In fact, they're jihadists in suits. When we come back from our break, we'll lead off with this montage and let you see for yourself what Donald Trump and so many other commentators were saying about Qatar just 8 years ago. Just 8 years ago. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We'll be right back.
Daily news, Bible prophecy. See the connection on the Trumpet Daily. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the flood of news and information? You need something to sift the news and bring you only what matters most. You need the Trumpet Daily. You also need something to help you understand not just what's happening now, but what will happen next. You need the Trumpet Daily. Only the Trumpet Daily accurately matches daily news to precise Bible prophecies. Because Bible prophecy is the only tool up to the task of sifting the news down to what's important and showing you what will happen next. Join host Stephen Flurry every weekday. Go to trumpetdaily.com.
And we have to confer with the Qataris, who have told me over and over again that Hamas is a humanitarian organization. Maybe they could use their influence to
the U.S. thinks they're a terrorist organization, though. Correct to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hillary took millions from Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, and many other countries that horribly abuse women. Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money. So I'd like to ask you right now, why don't you give back the money that you've taken from certain countries that treat certain groups of people so horribly? Why don't you give back the money?
This week, when Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State, she said she would let the State Department know if a major donation was made to the Clinton Foundation. It turns out $1 million was given to the Clinton Foundation by the government of Qatar. State Department was never informed. Why not?
As the Clinton Foundation would alert State Department if anyone gave a donation that was materially different than what they had been giving before Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. The government of Qatar had been a donor to the foundation, which, as you know, does great work around the world before she became Secretary of State.
This is a big story, and you've got all of these countries now cutting ties to the Qataris. What's your sense of Qatar? And let's not forget that we have our main military operation in Qatar. Our military operation in the Middle East is housed in Qatar.
Yes, and that may, in retrospect, have turned out not to be the very best choice to make, because Qatar is, I'm afraid, rather locked into its radical Islam funding, and they will look you straight in the eye and say they're not doing a thing like that, and then shovel under the table, shovel the money out to Hamas and to the violent side of the Muslim Brotherhood and so on.
And it had been talked about that the U.S. may even threaten to move the bases out of Qatar and move to someplace else in the region.
Now, I think what we're seeing are the Gulf states deciding that the double game, the dirty game the Qataris have been playing for 30 years, which is to play the Iranian side and the Arab side also within the Sunni world, to play the terrorists. They support the Muslim Brotherhood. They have given indirect support to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS. They support Hamas. The Egyptian government is in a war against the Brotherhood, Hamas, and it's got Al-Qaeda in the Sinai, all of which are supported indirectly or directly by the Qataris. This, I think, is Egypt, Saudi Arabia acting together, saying, we now have an umbrella of American protection, a president who supports us. We're going to have to end this game. And
the president is celebrating what he says is now fruit from that trip. I want to read you some of his tweets this morning, then get your reaction. He says, during my recent trip to the Middle East, I stated that there can no longer be funding of radical ideology. Leaders pointed to Qatar. Look. He went on to say this: so good to see the Saudi Arabia visit with the king in 50 countries already paying off. They said they would take a hard line on funding extremism, and all reference was pointing to Qatar. Perhaps this will be the beginning of the end to the horror of terrorism. What do you make of this move to cut off the diplomatic ties, travel, trade, all those kinds of things with Qatar?
Great move, Shannon. The moderate Arab states are drawing a line in the sand. They're saying to Qatar, either you're with us or you're with the radical Islamic forces. Qatar is a primary backer of Hamas because Qatar has a lot of blood on his hand, whether as an ally of Iran, which is the principal backer of Hezbollah, and has been complicit in the massacre of 500,000 Syrians. It's a lot of blood, Shannon. The Gaza Strip, where there's a brutal Islamic jihadist regime in control. Qatar is backing the forces of darkness and evil in this area of the world. So,
and I think it has to do not only with Qatar's funding of terrorists like the Muslim Brotherhood and ISIS, Hamas, but also their policy vis-a-vis Iran and the nuclear weapons program. Well, they share a big natural gas field with Iran. They've been, of the GCC members, probably the most open to dealing with Tehran and most supportive of the Tehran regime's nuclear efforts. So this is something that has bothered the other Arab states on the peninsula, bothered the Egyptians, and I think the decisive step of cutting off air and sea traffic, land traffic across the Saudi border is a pretty strong signal from the other GCC members.
Back then, the president lavishly praising the Emir of Qatar.
We are friends. We've been friends now for a long time indirectly, haven't we?
But today, the president turning against him, praising the Saudis, who in a sudden move are leading an Arab coalition cutting off Qatar by air and sea, including no commercial flights. The Saudis claim Qatar supports Islamic extremists, which Qatar strongly denies. The president today siding with the Saudis, tweeting, "They said they would take a hard line on funding extremism, and all reference was pointing to Qatar. Perhaps this will be the beginning of the end to the horror of terrorism." Today, the president accusing a major U.S. military ally in the war against ISIS of financing terror.
The nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level. And in the wake of that conference, nations came together and spoke to me about confronting Qatar over its behavior. The time had come to call on Qatar to end its funding. They have to end that funding and its extremist ideology in terms of funding. I want to call on all of the nations to stop immediately supporting terrorism. We're making sure that terrorism funding is stopped in the countries that we are really related to, because I feel related. But those countries are stopping the funding of terrorism. And that includes UAE, it includes Saudi Arabia, it includes Qatar and others. A lot of countries were funding terrorism and we're stopping it. It's getting stopped and fast. Very important. And you've now become a very big advocate, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, President. I want to make something very clear, Mr. President. We do not and we will not tolerate with people who fund terrorism. We've been cooperating with the United States of America to stop funding terrorism.
A very different approach 8 years ago, as you can plainly see. I mean, Donald Trump campaigned. He campaigned on the fact that Hillary Clinton took millions from Qatar. You saw the debate clip. You've taken millions. How could you do that? Well, we're taking hundreds of millions, billions. And it's right out in the open. And if you could criticize it or complain about it, well, you're stupid. Why wouldn't you take the millions? Even Hillary Clinton didn't say that back during that debate. You take their money. So you shouldn't be president. That's what Donald Trump was saying. They've been, I think it was Krauthammer in that montage, who said they've been playing Qatar. They've been playing this dirty game for 30 years. You've got the president of Syria that's been playing the dirty game for decades. But Steve Witkoff looks at him now and says, hey, I think he's a reformed man. I think he wants peace. I think dialogue will fix this. This article, it's a long, I didn't get through all of it this morning. I didn't have time, but it's from the Free Press. How Qatar bought America. How did this happen? This tiny little nation, this tiny nation that has a lot of wealth, and they're just buying off it. Talks about all the conflicts of interest. The tiny Gulf nation has spent almost $100 billion to establish its influence in Congress, universities, newsrooms, think tanks, and corporations. And given what we're hearing today, compared to the clips you just saw, I mean, they're having quite a lot of success in paying for good coverage, in paying for support from university campuses, even support from congressmen and women. The airplane deal, that's the big jumbo jet, the palace in the sky, the deal was signed off by Attorney General Pam Bondi. She used to work at a Washington, D.C. lobbying firm that received $115,000 a month from Qatar to fight human trafficking. There's just conflicts of interest all over the place. I mean, you know about Steve Witkoff and his failing business. He was bailed out by Qatar to the tune of $600 million. It says, but Qatar is also the seat of the Muslim Brotherhood, a crucial source of financing to Hamas, a diplomatic and energy partner of Iran. You heard some of that in the montage we just played. It's still true. They haven't converted to Christianity in the last 8 years. A refuge for the Taliban's exiled political leadership, financier and cheerleader of Palestinian terrorism, and the chief propagandist of Islamism through its media powerhouse, Al Jazeera, which reaches 430 million people in more than 150 countries. It's a big-time funder of terrorism, as Trump said back in 2017, at a high level. And then what goes out over the airwaves with Al Jazeera into 150 countries? It's paying off. It's paying off. The title of the article, How Qatar Bought America. You see, we've been manipulated. We've been purchased. We will enter into a deal no matter the costs, no matter what's at stake. Just do the deal. And Qatar is, well, they're front in line. Why wouldn't they be? Look at their returns. They're getting everything they want. And Putin, I mean, he sees all this and he's like, I'm going to keep killing Ukrainians until I get what I want. They know, as that one article put it, they know, or I guess it was in a clip, they know how impatient this administration is. We have got to do a deal. We've got to complete this ceasefire arrangement. We've got to do it. We've got to do it now. It says here, key members of Qatar's royal family have made their admiration for Islamism and Hamas specifically very clear. Sheikha Moza bint Nasser, the mother of Qatar's emir and the chairperson of an educational nonprofit funneling millions into American schools, praised the mastermind of the October 7 massacre. He will live on, she wrote on X after his death last year, and they will be gone. He will live on. His legacy continues. That's the mother of the emir. She's the one that presides over all the funneling of millions through a nonprofit into American university. Everyone's complicit. Everyone is willing to surrender. As long as you get, a few greenbacks, then surrender. That's part of the deal. Just surrender and then get some money. It says here, Qatar has spent almost $100 billion to establish its legitimacy in Congress, American colleges, universities, U.S. newsrooms, think tanks, corporations. Over the past 2 decades, it's poured those billions into purchases of American-made weapons and business investments, ranging from U.S. real estate to energy plants. It built and still pays for the Al Udeid Air Base, even as the American wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have ended. Doha finances research and campuses at prestigious American universities, and its lobbyists have the connections needed to open all the right doors in Washington. Since 2017, since that montage, most of those clips from 2017, Qatar has spent $225 million in lobbying and public relations efforts in the nation's capital, just in D.C. alone, just in the swamp. And now, of course, they're gifting Air Force One to the Trump administration, to the Defense Department. And the president says you would be stupid not to receive those millions, not to receive that free gift. Play clip 2.
So I think it's a great gesture from Qatar. I appreciate it very much. I would never be one to turn down that kind of an offer. I could be a stupid person, say, no, we don't want a free, very expensive airplane. And I think this was just a gesture of good faith.
My understanding is it's not a personal gift to the president, it's a gift to the United States, and other nations give us gifts all the time. But I'm going to leave it to the administration. They know much more about the details of that, okay? It's not my lane.
I think we would be crazy not to accept the plane. And I think people have been watching way too many spy movies. And if you think the United States government and our Defense Department is not going to strip the plane, I think it's totally okay.
Look, the left is going crazy about this, but they need to be careful. They're fine with Harvard getting all these gifts from these Middle Eastern countries.
And he, I think, is dealing in realism. He would say, I'm dealing with the people that I have to deal with. You may not like it, but these are the people I have to deal with. On Qatar, I mean, we have $26 billion in active foreign military sales with these people. They're the second largest foreign military sales partner that we have. They just spent $8 billion over the last several years on our huge military base that we have there. So it's not like we're not already in bed with the people in Qatar, like it or not. And I'm not here to defend some of the things they've done, but we already have partnerships with these people. And so the idea that this president is not going to deal with them or deal with other players in the region when we are already so entangled, I think, is not realistic.
I'm chuckling, I guess, because I think the media is making a much bigger deal out of this than it needs to be. This will go through the ethical checks and the legal checks to make sure it is everything's in order before it happens.
Well, I don't know, Jake. The French gave us the Statue of Liberty. The British gave us the Resolute desk. I'm not sure they asked for anything in advance. And the more important airplane deal was there's $100 billion of orders from Qatari Airlines to Boeing. You know, I think that plane deal is much more important than this other one.
Of an offer. I mean, I could be a stupid person and say, no, we don't want a free, very expensive airplane.
He said at the start, I would never be one to turn down this offer. I mean, he just can't say no. And suddenly, we can't turn down these bribes. The Washington Free Beacon, the owner of Trump's Qatari Air Force One is linked to Bob Menendez corruption scandal. It says here, Qatari royal and former prime minister Hamad Jassim Thani, HBJ, we'll call him that, keep it simple. He's linked to the bribery case involving former Senator Bob Menendez. They're good at bribing. They funnel money into the swamp, into the universities, into the media, because they want some good coverage. They want you to think that they are a good actor on the world stage. And then under the table, they slip millions, hundreds of millions to Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, radical Islam, you name it. Flight records and public documents suggest a close connection between HBJ and the Menendez corruption scandal. It says when prosecutors unveiled a Menendez indictment in March of 2024, they noted that the former senator had received gifts from a Qatari investment company. Well, I mean, I know Menendez is going off to prison, but how could you turn down an offer? That's what the president says. How could you turn down an offer from Qatar? The New York Times identified the company as Heritage Advisors, a firm founded by a member of the Qatari royal family. The guy whom a source familiar identified as an HBJ confidant and business partner. I mean, we are seeing some pretty shameful capitulations over and again. It says a lot, not just about the leaders in Qatar or in, Putin's Russia or Tehran, but it says a lot about our leaders and how easy it is to manipulate them, how easy it is to bribe them, to pay them off. And if you do it, they'll think you are a peacemaker. Because any difficult problem between nations can be solved through dialogue. I've got more, but that's all we have time for on today's show, the fastest moving hour in broadcasting. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. Thank you for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you tomorrow.